Let's look at the trade, how it is transforming in 2021. The overall trade, what's happening is very important. Overall world trade recorded a drop in value about 9% last year, 2020. The effect of COVID-19 on global trade was most severe during the first half of 2020, with a drop in value about 15%. Global trade began to recover in Q3 2020 and more strongly in Q4. So we have semblance of recovery. The prospects for 2021 and beyond are increasingly uncertain because of the first wave, second wave, different variant of COVID-19, uncertain due to the rising incidence worldwide, and the emergence of new variant on the disease is really costing the overall momentum. Now, trade in goods declining about 6%. If you look at last year, the recoveries in the second half of 20 was largely on the rebound of trade in goods. World merchandise trade volume growth remained strong in the fourth quarter of 2020 after trade rebounded the third quarter from a deep slump. However, the pace of expansion in the fourth is unlikely to be sustained in the first half of 2021. It's research thinking that now the vaccine has come, everything will be all right. Now it's not the case, since key leading indicators appears to have already peaked according to the WTO. So there is a real challenge now. Service trade, how it is going to be impacted. Trade in services decreasing about 16.5%. Trade in service continues to lag sustainability below average, while trade in services stagnated in Q3 2020 levels. The plunge was exacerbated by restrictions on international travel. That has really put a block, which represents a key source of export earnings for many low-income countries. So the travel restrictions has impacted really to tell. So if I look at the major trends in terms of economies, what's happening in terms of trade, import and export trade, for some of the world major trading economies illustrate how patterns have changed during 2020. In the first half of 2020, all major economies are experiencing significant downturn in both imports and exports of goods, with even heavier declines in the trade of services. Although improvements have been seen from lows earlier in the year, the value of trade remained lower for nearly all major economies in the third quarter of 2020 than the same quarter the previous year. A growth of around 3% in Chinese good export was the exception to this trend. That's the only exception last year. The rest of the world has come down. In the fourth quarter of 2020, while trade in goods was satisfactory substantially across major economies, trade in services, in contrast, remain below averages. If you look at, so overall import and export numbers are differing in different parts of the world. Even emerging markets are under the water. So the regional trends, if you look at it, trade recovery of quarter four is largely due to developing countries. Import 6%, export 8%. The trade goods from developing countries have recovered strongly relative to developed countries, especially in relation to exports, especially merchandise. The positive trade growth of developing countries in Q4 2020 vanishes once East Asian economies are excluded. Now, import at 1% and export, there's no export, literally. The import of East Asian economies in explaining the recovery, developing countries even more marked when considering the trade among the developed countries. If you look at Q3, they're down by 3%. In Q4, they are up by 7%. South-South trade of Asian developing economies, if you look at it, results in significant drop. Even in quarter four, South-South is a drop. Q3 is down by 14% and Q4 down by 9%. East Asia is the main contributor to global and South trade. Now, in terms of sector, let's look at the sector. What are the global trade levels at sector level? The trade recovery of the major second half has encompassed most sectors, major covering Q3 and Q4. Minerals, contraction 2%. Office equipment, 16%, 14% up. Textile, 40%, 16%. Again, communication equipment, 1% and 11%. With the exception of energy, that is contraction of 34%. And transport equipment, again 29%. The value of trade of these two sectors was still about 1/3 lower compared to the second half of 2020 related to the same year, previous year, if I look at 2019. Notably, the trade recovery in Q3 was largely driven by sectors related to goods which were demand has increased because of the COVID-19, for example, textiles, office equipment. Everyone needs computers now. And hospitals has been more broad-based in Q4. Trade, most sectors recording positive growth. So broad recovery is happening, but not in real terms. Now, overall, if you look at sectors, very few sectors has been positive. Now, when it comes to Qatar trade, let's look at Qatar trade. 3 quarters of 2020 was 138.4 billion. Qatar import for 3 quarters 2020 was 69.6. Total trade in third quarter is 208 billion, all put together. If you sum it up, both export and import. Total trade in 2019 was 371 billion. Import was 1606, export was 265. So 371 as against 208. The drop in volume 2020 mainly due to the pandemic COVID-19. So that's the situation we are in. So trade is impacted. We hope the vaccine will be administered very soon and the trade will resume, both merchandise as well as service. Now, this year is still uncertain on account of the challenging circumstances of multiple variants, but we hope the world recover faster, trade, investment, banking and finance move in the right direction to improve the overall economic fundamentals and sustain a global growth.